Today we have a very special guest. His name is Michael Su. This man, in 2 years, has built up a rental portfolio of $1 million while at the same time working diligently at his full time tech job. So, before I get all into the details about Michael Su, Michael, I wanted you to tell me, first of all, they already kind of have an idea of what you do. Tell me, first of all, how did you start into the journey of entrepreneurship? I know you have a full time job, I know you're working at that really hard, but I really wanted to know, where did that start? Like, what were you doing before jumping into real estate?
Yeah, so I think there's actually those end up being a couple different questions because I've been interested in entrepreneurship since it's probably since high school. I built blogs and um, back when Google Ads was new, I remember trying to create ads directly going to ClickBank websites to try to get referral affiliate commissions. And back then, you could do that where you could directly link, and the ads were cheap enough, the leads were cheap enough that it could be profitable. Um, I was using my parents' credit card. I had a bunch of random stuff going on, and I wasn't old enough to have my own business. So that was kind of where I think where it all started.
What age was that? You said you weren't old enough to start.
I think I had to have been in freshman year of high school or something.
Wow. So you've had that kind of itch where you're just curious naturally.
Yeah, I've had the itch to make things for forever. Like I've built websites since probably middle school. I built a game when like a computer game when I was in elementary school. Um, but I'd say that kind of my turning point was in college. There was kind of two paths for me to go down. One of them was to go into finance to become an investment banker, try to have a high salary, or go into startups and entrepreneurship. And I was really, really much more excited about the entrepreneurship. I grew up in Silicon Valley, surrounded by other people who are entrepreneurs. Obviously, not everyone was successful, but the ones you heard of were the successful ones. And so, what that led me to is kind of junior year, I was interning and had all these interviews for investment banks, and I decided to switch instead to work for a startup for very little, if almost no pay. And that ended up being like my entire career path up to now, working for early stage tech companies, working for venture backed startups, and then eventually transitioning into trying to do things a little bit more entrepreneurial on my own.
Now, what made you choose the startup route? Because a lot of people are faced with that kind of decision, facing something that you probably are going to have a high starting pay out up front versus something where you're probably going to get paid less but have the potential for more. Like, what made you go through that and decide that? What was the thought process like?
Yeah, well, I think the thought process at the time, which I think is different than how I think about it now, at the time it was pretty simple. It was, if I graduate and I'm very successful in one path versus very successful in the other path, will I be happy with where I'm at? So let's say that I became a finance guy. I worked at an investment bank. I went to go, become private equity or kind of go down that path and become a managing director. You know, say I'm 60, I'm making gobs of cash, high salary, and let's say I'm successful, I don't get pushed out. Um, I'll be working, still like 60, 80-hour weeks. There's reports of managing directors, giving birth and going back to work the next day. Like, there's crazy stories on like their lifestyle, and it's just a very cutthroat environment. And I feel like I wouldn't be happy there. And I thought about, okay, well, if I was successful creating a startup that I was passionate about, and I was able to build that out, and regardless of the money and exactly how successful it is, I would feel much more fulfilled, right? I think you have to live the life. You only have one life. You have to live the life that you want to be, that you want to, that's worth remembering.
Right. And I think that's very intelligent of you because a lot of people don't think that way because how you approached it, you kind of started with the end in mind.
With the end in
You
mind.
looked at the very end and you said, look, if I continued this path, this choice, I wouldn't be happy. I might still be working these 80-hour weeks for someone else and not feeling super fulfilled. And I actually just talked to a buddy, Rustam Rakimov, and he said the same thing with a different industry, actually. You actually know him. We call him
No,
Red.
Red.
But he was a professional fighter. I don't know
Oh,
if you
really?
knew that.
I didn't know
And
that.
he was a good fighter. Like, it was a mix of kind of kung fu and a different type of I don't know the exact type, but
Yeah.
essentially he was really good. But then in the future, as he was kind of looking to the future, he's like, you know what? He looked long term. He saw the end of the other fighters that he was around.
Mm-hmm.
He saw how they weren't coherent, how their brains were just messed up from being punched in the head all the time. And he's like,
Yeah.
this is not for me. So I think it's super intelligent
Yeah.
he went that route. And I think that's what most entrepreneurs, most business people, a lot of the ones who don't really know what they're doing or don't have an idea of what they should do, they should start there, start at the end. So that was your start. So you started learning like these ClickFunnels, these marketing things when you're super young. You got into tech and all that. Now, can you briefly describe what you do? I don't know if you're allowed, but for your job.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CTO of a tech company called Blueboard. We help large businesses reward their employees. So if you need to reward your employees, hit up blueboard.com.
There we go.
Don't know if you're going to cut this out.
No, I won't.
But yeah, I've been doing that for about 8 years, and before that, I was an engineer at another tech company called Five Stars. So it's just really been doing the technology portion all my life, up until recently, where I had more and more of an interest in sales and marketing.
Gotcha. So that's actually, it's a higher up position of any kind of company, CTO. Right. Now, how did you make the transition? I don't even call it a transition, but how did you make the steps towards doing real estate while working the full-time job? Like, what was the thought, and then what did you do?
Well, one of the best part about real estate is that you can put in as much time or as little time as you want to, right? People can buy a house on a 3-month spurt, maybe buy a couple houses, and then they could stop for a while. They could stop for a couple years and come back. And the great part about real estate is because you can put in as much or as little time, and your returns are generally commensurate with the amount of time you're putting in. What you can do is you can kind of dip your toes in, right? So for me, I could keep my job, but on nights and weekends, I could put in the effort to learn real estate, and I could put in the effort to purchase real estate, and then just kind of from there adjust to how much I want to do. I definitely didn't expect to do as much as I have at this point. That wasn't the initial goal, but it definitely learned a lot along the way, and it was also really popular at the time. There's a bunch of articles and blogs about long-distance real estate investing or remote real estate investing, and that was something I really needed to read to unlock a limiting belief I had, because at the time I was officially living in San Francisco, which is really expensive. Things don't cash flow, and it's a lot of risk on your first deal if you buy wrong. Although technically I was a digital nomad at the time.
Let's touch on that. So you said you wanted to know and understand that whole virtual side of being able to do real estate investing virtually without having to be there in person. Probably a big reason because you have the job as well.
Right.
You can't spend your time while you're working hours. But what made you become a digital nomad, and can you even describe what even is that for the people listening?
Right. So a digital nomad is just someone who has the freedom to travel while working. People typically think of this as someone in their early 20s or in their 20s, maybe 30s, who's traveling the world, backpacking. And I started like that, but I think most digital nomads eventually realize that it's really tiring and it's not that fun to be switching countries all the time. And then people tend to go slow over time. So that was kind of where I was at, spending between 1 to 3 months in a location, really diving into the culture a little bit before moving on.
If you were to go back, would you have done that again, or would you recommend other people to do that?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend doing it, but only if it's something you're interested in, right? I think actually if you take the digital nomad part and this kind of real estate part, they're all towards building a lifestyle that you want to live, right? So I was really enamored by the fact that, or by the idea of traveling the world, understanding other cultures, and learning things from different cultures, because I feel like that was the biggest thing for me, was seeing how other people in the world live their lives. And learning languages and how people think differently because of their languages. And the financial freedom part, which is the real estate part, is something that's also important because that enables you to do what you want with your time. And so I would definitely recommend it, but I would also say, you know, like, make sure you're also thinking about your finances at the same time. The order in which you do it, people switch it around. Some people work on the financial freedom first, then they look towards their other, you know, life goals. I kind of did the opposite, where I felt like, okay, I kind of know the type of life that excites me, but now I have to go back and make sure that I'm financially ready to live that life
Right.
forever going forward.
Right. So let's say there's a person in a similar position as you when you were starting out the
Yeah.
real estate journey. Let's say they're working a full-time job. They don't have the time or the capacity to do all these things themselves.
Right.
What, like, let's walk through that first hire of what essentially you needed to start the real estate business and kind of get it going, and what you think someone else could have done, or if you would have done something different, or if you were happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it just kind of depends on your situation, right? You know, usually for real estate, you either need to spend more time or more money. So if you have a high-paying job and you have savings, you can find a realtor, an investor realtor, who can help you find that first deal. Most likely, as an investor realtor, they're not going to find you a smoking hot deal. It's just not that likely, and so hence you're going to have to pay more. Um, the advantage, though, is that if you're buying your very first property, you could probably just house hack it, meaning that you're going to beat investors like me and Justin, because you're going to have a lower down payment, 3.5 to 5%. You're going to be able to have the lowest possible interest rate, and you only have one property to worry about, so you can spend all your time on that. And so, in that sense, like, you're able to find that first property, and if you don't spend as much time, you can find an easier property to purchase, but you're just paying a little bit more and a lower return on that first property, but you learn the whole process of investing, of renting out that rental. If you have a bit more time, I'd say the thing to focus on is finding a good deal. So spend all your time analyzing deals and figuring out how to reduce the amount of time you spend looking at bad deals, right? So for all the listeners out there, my 1 minute funnel that I would tell you to do is go hit up a realtor who's an investor agent, have them set you up on a list, use that list to practice, but usually those lists actually don't have very many good deals. Then you want to hit up that realtor plus other investor realtors if you can to feed you deals that they personally think are good, like not as part of this automatic list. Then I would go and I would search We Buy Houses in your city. Those are all what we call wholesalers, and they usually have a list where they send out properties that they think is good enough for an investor to buy. You get on all their lists, and now you're going to get maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 emails a day, and all you have to do is check those emails, and there's probably only one property per email, and that gives you 4 deals that someone else thinks is a good deal to purchase every single day of the week.
Gotcha. No, I like that strategy. Another thing I want to talk about, just because this is general an entrepreneur podcast, I think it's super helpful for because most people will be interested in some form of real estate investing. A lot of them will be. But from what you've learned just operating a real estate investing business, especially going through, because I actually do know you more personally,
Yeah.
especially going through a recession, a downtime in the economy, what kind of lessons have you learned personally about trying to manage that real estate investing business in the down market, and what can other entrepreneurs learn from that? Like, what kind of things that maybe you wish you did differently to navigate the down market, or what are things that you're super happy you did?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing you learn is cash is king, right? So, a lot of investors, they're like, if my cash is invested, it's being wasted, right? And I like to look at really big companies and see what they're doing and try to understand why they're doing certain things, right? So, for instance, there's a lot of big companies that have a lot of cash. Why do they have cash? Isn't it, a drag on their return on investment? Well, the cash lets them weather any storm. So if like Apple has $50 billion on their balance sheet, when there's an opportunity, they're able to jump on it, right? And then when there's a downturn or when there's a mistake, they're able to weather it. And so the more volatile your business is, the more cash reserves you want to have. And so you shouldn't think of it as as like keeping that cash for investment return, but keeping that cash, especially in real estate, to prevent the leverage from taking you under. I think that what I'm really happy for is rentals. I think that rentals are kind of steady no matter what the market once they're stabilized. I think that when the market's hot, a lot of people get caught up into buying flips and kind of changing their numbers, especially as a beginner, right? I mean, relatively speaking, you haven't been in real estate very long. We've been in this crazy upcycle for almost our entire real estate career. And so for me, we kind of followed where the market went in terms of what is appropriate to buy, because we would be competing against other buyers. And so like what happens is that as you scale up and you start leveraging more, when the market shifts as dramatically as it does, or if it freezes as dramatically as it does, you just got to make sure you have the downside protected. And so like right now I'm going through a little bit of struggles with just making sure that my existing investments are managed and that they get sold off at an appropriate timeline, and that I have enough funding to weather the storm.
Right. I think it's a big key is that cash really is king. And it's something that I'm realizing even going through this market is in terms of we're in the same kind of business, the real estate investing. But this is true for any business out there is, there are downside times, there's down cycles, there's up cycles, there's things there's times when things are bad. Right. And in those times, if you do not have the cash, it's going to be a struggle. Yeah. As a business owner or entrepreneur, you'll find a way. You'll probably find a way, maybe. But if you don't have the cash, or at least some type of credit to get cash or investors, it's tough to navigate those down times. Right. And it's something that you're realizing, something that I'm realizing. So if you were to go back in time, I mean, not even just the beginning of the recession, but if you were to start real estate differently, like you made that jump and you wanted to start it differently, was there anything else that you would have done based on your goals? Because I think everyone listening can learn from what other people wish they would have done themselves.
Yeah. I think there's there's kind of two types of real estate investors. One is people who have an income, they have a job, or they have another business, some other form of active income, and they want to invest in real estate with their extra cash. And then there's people who are full-time real estate investors. So I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of someone who, has done a lot of real estate, but probably wants to keep another stream of income, active stream of income. For those people, I'd say that like real estate's a great wealth generator or wealth amplifier. So if you have, $100,000 with real estate, you can multiply that, and if you buy at a discount, you can gain instant equity. So like let's say you buy a $100,000 home, you pay, a full-time real estate person would really want to put in all the effort to get it to like 70-75% ARV. But as someone who has another income, you could get 80-85%, leave 5-10% in the deal, but now you made 15-20% on your 5-10% of the deal. You more than tripled your money. That's a great outcome for anyone. And you have this other stream of income, which hopefully is uncorrelated, or at least less correlated to real estate. And so you have a very stable business. So for me, I would honestly just, I would have just picked one thing in real estate, done it, and then just done that one thing well until that one thing basically, hit scale. And so what I mean by that is like right now I'm in multiple markets, right? I'm investing remotely. I kind of was trying to figure out if I'm going to be a full-time real estate investor or a part-time real estate investor, and how hands-on or how hands-off I'm going to be. I think at this point, like I have a much clearer idea of what I'm going to do, right? Like if I could go back, I would pick one market. I'd buy rentals, I'd rehab them, and then I'd rent them out. And I do that over and over and over again rather than trying to expand to more markets. I just focus on that one market and knock it out.
That makes sense. So it's basically finding a different, like an actual focus of what you're wanting to do, what strategy. Because I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. That's where I struggled before, when not just real estate, but when I was starting.
I still struggle.
Yeah, yeah, I actually know you, but it was the hardest thing for me. Like when I was starting my entrepreneur journey, I did have a full-time job. I was a banker. I was doing loan officer stuff and their accounting. So I was doing like a mix of different things. And during that time, I was also a realtor on the side. I was also a personal trainer where I would train people on the weekends, before work on the weekdays, after work on the weekdays. And I was also looking for my first real estate deal, or my second at the time. So it was like four different things at one time. And I was mediocre at everything. But I think that's more of not because of the kind of person I am, but because of my focus was just so spread out. I was spread so thin that it's so hard to become really good at
Yeah,
everything.
definitely.
And yeah, I think that's probably a smart strategy
Yeah.
to have the focus. So for you right now, what are you looking to do? I guess in the future, in terms of you have the full time job. Are you looking to push harder in real estate? Are you looking to push harder something else? Like, where are you at right now?
Yeah, so like I am looking to push harder, but not as like, but from a different take than some of our friends, that some of these real estate friends that me and Justin share. Um, a lot of time a lot of time like the people that we know, right? They're going hard to find the deals. They're the wholesalers. They're going deal by deal, property by property, and they're going one at a time, right? This kind of is, I guess, how I approach all questions. All of these big like life questions where you have many different answers. Is start at the end, right? So if I start at the end, what do I want it to look like, right? If I was super successful in real estate and I could pick any type of real estate, right? I could do single family. I could do, multifamily, commercial, like malls, whatever it is. And you look like how many businesses do you know that are public that flip houses,
Not a lot.
right? Who are the biggest flippers you know, right? It's probably people on YouTube for the most part. They've done a lot of houses, but they're also much closer to the business. The people who work for these public companies, they're the ones who are able to work, like they don't check anything in person, right? So if my end goal is to be this entrepreneur who has some location freedom, has a team under me, is big enough to afford the team required to invest, like what business do I want to model myself after, right? And then start to look into those industries and companies and see how they do it, right? So a lot of the, let's say, single family homes, there are actually single family home public companies and single family home hedge funds. Their strong point is that they're able to raise a lot of money, right? They have a lot of money and they have very specific criteria and they're able to achieve economies of scale. Now, they're buying from wholesalers. Like, we know that. Our friends wholesale.
Yeah, we'd wholesale to them.
To them. But why do they do that? If you think about what I talked about earlier, where where I was saying like our active starting, active flipper wholesaler friends are trying to get 70-75% ARV, and then starting out you can go for the 80-85, especially if you have other income. Well, if you scale huge, you can get 80-85, but you don't need an active income if you're just an investment fund and you have millions of dollars in the bank. You can still buy 80-85, triple your money. That's acceptable return for any investor that's has money with you. And of course, like there's some money that's going to your employees, overhead, whatever, but you're able to achieve a really significant return from the comfort of your office, right? And so like I think my end goal is to take that approach. I don't necessarily think I would even necessarily stay in single family, right? Like as the money gets larger, there's some benefits to going into multifamily or going into commercial, maybe warehouses or something. But I think that all of these different asset classes, they cycle. You do have to pick one to be good at. But if it's oversaturated, you don't want to be in that market either. But I think like the model for me is like to follow into one of those investment firm type of models. Yeah.
So it's basically always start with the end in mind, which is a recurring theme in this episode. Now, for what you're seeing now in the future and what you're trying to do, you already lived the life of a digital nomad. You liked having that freedom. Now, for the things you're pursuing now, because even your job it's virtual, your full-time job, you can do the real estate full-time. Do you have future plans to continue the digital nomad thing and try to travel more as you can manage your business, your work, and stuff like that?
Yeah, yeah. So the theme is what start with the end in mind, and so as you get older, or it's not even about age actually. It's just
Mm-hmm.
you change over time,
Mm-hmm.
and as you change over time, your ideal of what your life looks like changes. And so for me, like yes, I would love the opportunity to spend a few months in another country every year, and spend a few months at a time and really go deep, right? Like I have friends in Asia where like it'd be cool to spend time with them for several months out of the year before coming back. It'd be cool to avoid the seasons that I don't like in
Yeah.
certain areas.
Yeah.
So like I do want that. I do feel like there's benefits for having people work in person, but I also feel like as a reality of the life I want to live, I probably need to get pretty good at some sort of asynchronous work as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and ultimately, I think that means that I'm gonna have to find the way, with like how I want the different pieces of my life to work, and then envision what those businesses have to look like as a result.
That makes
Right?
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what maybe the people listening don't fully realize is how much you've thought about it, how much Michael actually thinks and goes through his head. So a lot of entrepreneurs or the influencers that you see online for entrepreneurship, everyone's always preaching action. Just do the action, do
Yeah.
the work, do it. And I'm a very big proponent of that too, because that's kind of my
Yeah.
personality. I just learn something, do it. But before you even do something, some of the most important times I think of your journey as an entrepreneur or business owner comes when you just sit down and think and really
Yeah.
think about what you want. Have a pen and a paper, something where you can actually visualize what you're trying to achieve so that you know the direction you're going. Because a lot of
Right.
people fly blind completely. So that's something I really wanted to point out because you're a thinker, and
I'm a
I
thinker.
can only say that because I actually know you, and I even just from if I just met you on this podcast, I could feel it already of how much you've thought about the end and what you're
Yeah.
trying to achieve. Now, for what you've accomplished so far, and you come across you're very humble, but you've done a lot. A great job as CTO. You are on the side managing an entire rental portfolio of around $1 million. How many rentals is that?
Um, 27 units that are mostly stabilized, although I think there's probably like, including the flips and everything, it's over 30 at the moment.
Okay.
But, we
Right.
should be selling those pretty soon here. So the portfolio should be coming back down to about 20 something.
Right. So that's around 30 properties in general, and you're doing this completely from a distance
Right.
with a full-time job, never seeing these properties in person. That's insane. Now, to achieve that, what are some things do you think like if you were to point out one, two things that has had the greatest impact on you? It could be personal, like
Yeah.
identities or characteristics, or it could be like things in business that you've done. What are the things that have really propelled you forward to achieve all that you've achieved?
Yeah. I think the number one thing for the way that I'm running things is people, right? Is understanding people and figuring out how you can connect with them. It's not necessary if you're in person because you can do everything yourself, right? When you're a one man team, like all that matters is how you as an individual execute. When you're remote, you have to trust other people to do everything for you, right? And I think the thing is, I'm always thinking about how you can align incentives so that everyone wins together. Your people who are boots on the ground. How can you provide more value to them over time as long as you're winning? And then the second thing is like, how do you find people you can trust and also make it such that they trust you, right?
Yeah.
Because trust is a huge component, and as a result, I think like one of the things that I think is like, don't make promises lightly, and when you make your promises, make sure you follow through on them as best as you can. Like there's things where the economy goes to crap, like right now, where like you might not be able to do exactly on the timeline you say you're gonna do things, but you should do everything within your power to make it happen. And even it comes down to like, hey, like you're gonna need a lot of time and something like, like you end up losing money or something and you have to pay people back, like pay back every single dollar that you owe people. And then when you're working with people, like try to understand their situations and help them out and make sure that like even if it wasn't written in contract, like everyone's a human being. Like everyone needs help sometimes, and help them when they need help, and they'll help you when you need help.
Right. No, so you touch on two very important points that I agree with both. One is people, having the right people in place, and then two is just staying true to your word.
Yeah.
Like keep your promises, and that's huge in business in general. Like
Yeah.
the thing that people don't realize is that we have a personal brand or a reputation, whether we realize it or not. So even if you don't create a lot of social media or post a lot, when someone thinks of your name, they're going to think of something.
Yeah.
And they're going to think either this guy's a scammer or sketchy or
Yeah.
like, no, this person has always stayed true to their word.
And I think the thing with business is that business gets better over time. Like one of the advantages you have that you can create for yourself, a moat you can create for your business, is the longer you do it, the more you get known and the bigger you can get, right? It's so easy to ruin that. It's so easy for you to do something, to scam something, get on the news, to get into scandal and ruin your reputation. And I see a lot of actual like newer investors who are a little bit shady sometimes with their words and what they say. And the thing with that is like, like you got to think the long-term game. Like if you truly want to invest in real estate long-term, like you can't be burning bridges. Like you're going to be a very mediocre player in this space.
Yeah, it's too many people are sketchy. And I see this a lot because I come in contact with a lot of either just people who reach out to me, or even if students are asking questions for investing, like, hey, should I do this? Should I say this? Like, it might be a lie. I'm like, no. Like, let's not do that. Let's be truthful. Let's be honest. And it makes a difference. Now, in terms of people, let me go back to that.
Okay.
Because pretty much all the people listening right now are solopreneurs or very close who are listening to this episode. When you hire people, people are pretty much the most important thing to grow your business fast or to scale it fast. Now, how do you properly hire people to ensure, at least get close to making sure you're finding the right people that you trust? Because that's something that even I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
Every time I hire an intern or different positions, it's like they could sell themselves really well on an interview or a resume or whatever it is, but when they start working, it's like, I thought you would do the work, but you didn't. Like, how do you find, or how do you filter those people?
So ideally, you know what the work entails. That's the first thing. So like, like it's not always possible, right? Like if you're hiring a software engineer and you're not a software engineer, you're gonna have to figure out some other way, some other proxy to figure out if they're good. But in real estate, generally every part of the business, especially if you're a solopreneur, you've already done it. And if you haven't, you should, because it's not that hard to do it once. Once you know the job requirement, what you need to do is ultimately do a skill test, right? Like in new businesses, you're not interviewing for personality, you're not interviewing for a lot of these other skills. You're trying to get initially like the most efficient use out of your dollar, right? So you might be hiring someone abroad, you might be hiring someone with a specific circumstance where they can only work part-time, but you need a skills test that runs them through exactly that so that you know that they can do exactly what you do. Now they're not going to do it the way you want to do it, and that's fine, but that they have the skills to be able to do it, and they're showing the attributes of someone who could be successful. I would say like if you could create a card, make a little scorecard of like what it would take from attributes of a person to be successful at the job, and interview for that and test the skill. But the skill they don't have to do it the way that you do it, but they should know how to do it. Especially as your first couple hires, you need people who can come in and do the work. You don't want to start with people who you need to train unless they're free.
Right.
And then I think the second thing is then it's on you, right? If they have the ability to be successful, you need to make sure that you're providing the proper guidance, right? It's a failure for you to take over their work and bring it back. Either they're incompetent or you're not a good leader. On the leadership part, you should document, you should map out and document exactly what their responsibilities are. So if 85%, usually it's like an 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of the time they're going to be doing one thing over and over and over. 20% of the time there's some things that come up and maybe they need to ask you questions. It's fine for now. And that 80%, I would just make a Loom video. Share your screen, Show them what you're doing. Show them how you analyze deals. If it's a script and they're calling people for you, share the script with them, listen to their recordings, and then give them feedback.
Mm-hmm. So you touch on a couple points. The one is the actual skills, which I think is hugely important.
Yeah.
Making sure you're finding people who actually know what they're doing to hire for that role. And then the other hard part is gaining the trust. The trust or like, because even with the right skill set that they have, even if you provide the proper leadership and the training and you're there for them constantly, some people just still don't do the work. Now, at what point do you say, you know what, I got to cut you? Because I think a lot of new entrepreneurs who hire someone, they hold on to people a little bit too long.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, they're going to work.
I'm definitely guilty of that. So.
Me too. That's why it's like, how do you know? Because for me, I typically can tell in 2 weeks if someone's even like good, but I don't really know the point of like how much more training do I give or how much do I be there for them versus, because when I have an A player, it makes such a difference.
Yeah, 100%.
So let me know your thoughts on that.
So I think when you're hiring, and this is what someone else had told me, that scorecard I talked about in terms of what will make them successful. The other part of the scorecard that you want to share with them is what you expect. And you want to break it down into metrics, right? There's some things that are hard, right? And I say this because I'm in a job that's really hard to quantify. As a software engineer, it's really hard to quantify what the output is. Like, write code that works. Well, it could take 10 hours, it could take 1 hour. Like, as an engineer, I know that making something work is not really a time-dependent thing. It's not like I hit something 10 times, it's done. It doesn't work like that. But for most jobs, it is something where you can quantify it. You can work, you've done the job. Well, assuming you listen to what I said, you've done it already. You know how long it takes. And you can give them a little buffer and be like, okay, well, within the first 15 days, we are expecting, or first 30 days, we expect you to get to do about process, let's say 5 properties a day, whatever processing means. And then, month 2, like we're trying to hit, 10 properties a day. And then we think that that's steady state. And so over time, you create this like green-yellow system. So where green is the goal, it's and you maybe create KPIs where for every part of your business, there's some metric that everyone on your team is trying to hit. Someone's responsible for. And every day they either hit it or they don't. And if they don't, and it's yellow, you guys are working on trying to figure out how you can move towards hitting that goal. And if they hit that goal, let's say 10 properties a day, great. And this is where like the fun part of being a CEO is. Then you turn the green back to yellow. Okay, 10, you can do 10. Let's see if you can do 15.
I see.
Like, is there somewhere where we can change what you're doing, or is there wasted effort somewhere? Or is there something that I can do on my end so that the leads you're getting are better so you could process more leads a day, right? And then you turn the green back to yellow, and now they're trying to work it back to green.
I see. Yeah. I like that.
And if it goes to red just means like they have no idea how to fix it.
Right.
That's when you have to come in and you need to figure out what's going on. If you can fix it, you fix it. If you can't fix it, probably need to let them go. Or that part of the business, there's some huge problem. It might be like macroeconomics or something else. But that's ideally something that's an exception. It doesn't happen that often.
I like that a lot. I'm gonna have to start implementing that because for me, I would either have like a hard line of here's the goal, and I try to set the expectation up front where you ask them, hey, like if you don't hit the goal that we both kind of came up with together every single week, what should I do? Should I reach out to you? Should I check in on you? Like, what? Because so that they're not like, oh, like I can't believe you reached out to me. But I like that green, yellow, red a lot. Definitely gonna have to start using that.
I'd say that there's one other thing I'd also suggest, especially if you're going from the solopreneur to your first initial hire, is start with contractors. So, and the reason why you start with contractors,
like independent contractors, right?
Independent contractors. Okay. And the reason why, if you can, I'd start with independent contractors is you can pay for performance. You can pay a little higher, and this is when you don't know yet what is yellow, what is green. How much can someone do? Something I realized is I know a lot more about my real estate business than any VA I bring onto my team. And there's a lot of things I haven't documented yet. You know, some one-offs that I'm like, all right, I'll just take this on for now. I'll figure it out. You know, it's in red. I have to go solve it. So if you hire a contractor, it gives you this benefit where you're able to define pay for performance, and then you pay for performance, and then you can start tweaking and adjusting to figure out what a full-time employee looks like. And then if that works, you can then ask that contractor if they want to go full-time, if you have a sustained level of work for them to do. But that allows you to be more flexible in the beginning, right? So like, let's say that like, you know, like we're editing videos. Let's say that it's like $30 a video, you know, just to say $30 a video. So I start paying them $30 a video. If I had a full-time guy, I could pay 15. So like a lot of people are like, wait, I could go cheaper. If someone could edit all these videos every day, like I could get it down to like $10 a video or something for like a quick edit. But, you know, do you have enough work for them? You've now incurred this debt where you're going to have to pay them this amount of money every single month, but you don't actually know if you can service that amount of work for them. So with by taking that first hire as a contractor, you're able to figure out how much they can do. You're also able to figure out how much you can give them, and then you can figure out what it looks like to actually have them full time. So over time, you can grow that volume and figure out that relationship. But a lot of times what people end up doing is they end up hiring, okay, I need one guy for transaction coordination, one guy for cold call, I need one guy to do my my lead management. Those are 3 functions you need, not necessarily 3 full-time jobs that you need to pay for.
No, I like that because it's actually something that I happen to be doing for one of the first times now with an actual editor. So, you know, with the editor, I pay him a certain amount per video, like it's a performance-based kind of thing. And as he's doing well and crushing. Now I'm starting to think like, oh, like what would it look like if he was part-time, like exact 20 hours a week or 40 hours, whatever it was, because I'm paying him weekly. I'm like, it's kind of annoying. So now it's like, so what you're saying is something I'm going through at this moment. I like that a lot, man. Thank you for that. That's a selfish question I had to ask. In terms of, now, I also wanted to just, as we kind of wrap up this episode, I wanted to ask you, is there a specific message that you really want to share just to the world? Because this is an entrepreneur podcast, but it doesn't have to be for them. Is it just a message that you're trying to get out, something that you care about or passionate about that you want to share for positive force of the world?
Yeah, sure.
Think deep now.
I feel like it's kind of long, but
it's all right.
I feel like it's really important, if we go back to like what we were talking about in the beginning, it's really important to live the life that you want to live, right? And I think that some level of entrepreneurship will give you more flexibility in creating that dream lifestyle than going 100% through just your salary or just your income, right? And whether you want to travel, a lot of people don't want to travel, like that's totally fine, but like living the life that you want to live and figuring out what you need to get there, I feel like that's super important. And with me believing, and probably most people on this podcast believing that entrepreneurship is the way to get there, I think, you know, there's 2 things. One is, you know, entrepreneurship is ultimately sales and then fulfilling what you sold, right? And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're going as quick time to money as possible. Like so many people are like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. But actually they're entrepreneurs. They're like, oh, I'm setting up an LLC. It's like, you've been setting up an LLC for like 3 months. Oh, I'm reading these books. Great. You've been reading books for 3 months. Just talk to somebody, right? And so like, I feel like there's a lot of room in this space in entrepreneurship to really dial in like a roadmap for people where it's just like, just don't do anything else. Follow this path and get to minimum viable entrepreneurship. Like how do you, I think real estate is great for this, where you can buy your first property and feel that value without needing to do way too much work or research, or like giving up your current job, right? Or if you do quit your job, how do you get to 6 figures in less than a year so that you feel stable? The biggest problem with entrepreneurship, people usually quit because they get like financial pressure. It takes too long. They start doubting themselves. What solves doubt in entrepreneurship is money.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
You get the money, you don't doubt yourself anymore.
Right.
And so, like, I think, like, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and you know this, is I'm trying to start doing more content myself. And the theme of my, I'm doing some real estate content as well, but the theme of my personal content is going to be around helping people find financial independence through their level of entrepreneurship, whether that's doing real estate on the side, or if it is eventually doing like a full-blown business or something like that. Like, how do you reduce all the risks? What are the things that are going to stop people from being successful and getting them from 0 to 1 with as high probability as possible?
I love that because you're showing people the way of how to
Yeah.
achieve that, but also not go all in, balls to walls, and kill
Right,
themselves.
and I'll say that I've done the boss.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yep.
I work for tech companies, which is you go big or you go home.
Mm-hmm.
You literally, like, your VCs are telling you have to hit like $1 million, or not $1 million, like $100 million or $1 billion exit for them to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, their model is that they have 100 of these bets and they just need one to work out,
Mm-hmm.
and then they actually average only like a 30% return
Mm-hmm.
year over year. But for you, it's like you have like, of those 100, you're like, well, 1% chance to be that $1 billion company. And actually, you probably know your chances.
Right.
And usually, you're not the number one
Right.
company in that portfolio. And it's that, or you lose it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that is really good for the venture capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good if your goal in life is to be a billionaire or bust.
Mm-hmm.
But for most people, I think that they just want to live their dream life. And that dream life doesn't require $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think if I can provide, instead of a 1% chance to be a billionaire, or it's probably lower than 1%, it's definitely lower than 1%.
Yeah.
But if I could provide, assistance for people to go from 0 to $1 million, in a given time frame, or like to build a 6-figure business,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would help, potentially tens of thousands of people live their dream life. And I think that's a goal that I get really passionate about.
Yeah, I love that because you're teaching people how to achieve what they're trying to achieve while also kind of maintaining like stability or like an idea of income, like financial, because the financial pressures are so real as an entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so real. Now, this is your chance to plug. So, is there one thing or two things that the audience here could bring to you, or things that you're looking for that they could bring, whether they're clients, whether it's, people you're looking for? What are you looking for right now?
Yeah. So if you're starting out in real estate and you're looking for coaching, you'll look for Justin. But
Yes.
I am also doing some coaching as well and exploring it. So if you've got questions or you think that I can help, reach out to me on Instagram as Michael Sue, or Michael Sue _TV on most other social media platforms.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on, man. I really appreciate it. I know they're going to get a ton of value out of this. And like you said, you can find him on Instagram, and we'll make sure we put his links in the description below. But otherwise,